As a civilization, we know what art is, and to prove it, we collectively pay vast amounts of money to construct monumental buildings to house and display valuable artistic pieces. But do we, as individuals, really know what art is? Or are we perpetually making random value judgments that this particular object is art, while that particular object is not? When does a utility object become a piece of art? For example, when do suitcases transcend from functional to artistic? Why is one piece of glass kept in a kitchen cupboard while another is for sale at an exclusive gallery? And, more futuristically, do we still call it art when a picture has been created by artificial intelligence and drawn by a computer printer? Or does something have to be manually created by a person to be considered a piece of art? So what is art? How do we define it? Why do we pay millions for one creation and not another? Why do some art critics claim that your child could not have painted that, while you proudly frame their preschool scribblings and hang them in the family room as a reminder of just how creatively clever your 5-year-old is? I have so many questions, but am I able to find any sensible answers? Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Living an Unlived Life. This is the third video in my Mindset Reset Challenge series, which came about when, in late 2024, I decided to radically change my life by making not one, but a whopping 52 New Year's resolutions. If you are new to my channel, you can find the introduction to my Mindset Reset series here. In this first activity in my Mindset Reset series, I challenged myself to draw with chalk on a nearby pavement, which is not something I'd done since playing hopscotch as a child 60 years ago. I thought it would be a simple way of getting started in my challenge series. Buy a box of chalk, walk down the street, kneel down and start drawing. But that wasn't the way it happened, and my first attempt ended in a frustrating, though funny, failure. Good morning, world. This is day one of my Mindset Reset Challenge, and I'm here at Western Park in Canberra with my chalk, ready to go to do some art on this beautiful pavement here. The only catch is that while it's 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and normally this is a really quiet place, there is a massive convoy of cars coming in. There must be some function on. There are people everywhere, joggers, cyclists, you name it. So I'm going to find another quieter spot. Bye. When I left the park, I was determined to not let my failed first attempt deter me. I'd find another place to write my messages of hope, but it was a searingly hot day and I needed coffee. So I headed home, and while drinking the coffee, entertained myself by searching for chalk art inspiration on the internet. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a mistake too, because instead of being inspired, I became overwhelmed and intimidated by the fabulous pieces of chalk art that other people had created. 2 weeks slipped by while I made excuses to get started again. It was too hot, or too wet, or too windy, or I had more important activities to pursue, such as riding my trail bike up a steep rocky mountain for another one of my challenges. Although, all the while, I kept asking myself this question: why am I avoiding getting on with what is obviously a very easy and fun activity? In the end, I decided my procrastination was a function of the fact that I was confused about what I was doing. Was I creating a piece of art? Was I making an emotional statement? Or was I just seeking attention? Maybe I'd just write words of hope on the footpath, though I wouldn't be the first person to leave a one-word emotional message in that way. Arthur Stace had claimed that honour nearly 100 years earlier with his daily inscriptions of eternity on the footpaths of Sydney. Interestingly, after Arthur's death in 1967, the New South Wales government passed legislation permitting the use of chalk on public pavements. After reading this, I realised that I had no idea whether writing with chalk on a footpath was legal in the jurisdiction where I lived, the Australian Capital Territory. Would I be breaking the law simply by writing one word on a public walkway? A quick web crawl left me none the wiser. It seemed that, On one hand, my hometown was so enlightened that there were even dedicated legal places for graffiti artists to practice their tags, with sites located all over the city, while on the other hand, a chalk stick was obviously the poor cousin of a can of spray paint, with nothing to laud its artistic existence, maybe because it is so transitory. While checking out the legal situation in my hometown, I was reminded of the legal moral matrix. Just because something is illegal doesn't necessarily mean that it is immoral. And just because something is legal doesn't necessarily make it a moral activity. If what I was doing by writing in chalk on a sidewalk was illegal, was it also immoral? I thought probably not. If I simply wrote words that contained positive messages, how could that be a bad thing? So I focused on what seemed to be the legal bottom line, that writing with chalk on a piece of public property was only a bad thing if it caused damage to people or the property. In the end, I decided to risk it. I was getting paranoid. There were obviously much worse crimes for law enforcers to focus on in my hometown than an old woman attempting to recreate her childhood. But I lowered my goals and decided that maybe I'd start in a drain where no one could see me, just to get my eye in and boost my confidence. But let's go back to graffiti for a moment. While we tend to think it is a modern phenomenon, it actually started thousands of years ago with cave drawings. Indeed, cave art is the original form of chalk drawing, with pieces of soft rock, lumps of charcoal, or a paste of red ochre earth used to make the drawings. Graffiti was common for tens of thousands of years among indigenous tribes in Australia and America. It was popular in Roman times, then resurfaced in its modern form with the mass production of cans of spray paint in hundreds of different colours. But is graffiti art? When illicitly spraying coloured paint on public and private property, graffiti practitioners aim to spread their messages without being caught. While some graffiti could be considered artistic, much of this type of visually creative expression is not particularly attractive. Indeed, in some cities, it is a pestilence that knows no bounds. I once rode in a taxi from the centre of Athens out to the airport and played a mental game in which I counted the seconds between seeing tags of graffiti. I never got past 5 seconds. In the city where I live, there is no random graffiti on public buildings, absolutely none, which is a testament to the government's enlightened policy of allowing graffiti artists to practice at liberty in designated places. But in terms of whether graffiti is art, it is clear that some graffiti can be considered to be artistic, but most of it cannot, which would suggest that any definition of art will be found not in the medium itself that is used in the creative expression, but in the resultant product of that expression. In an effort to get a better hold on exactly how to define art, rather than resort to dictionary definitions, I went to the Australian National Gallery and chatted with some of the people there. When I first asked the question, several people were flummoxed, one person to the point where he was uncomfortably speechless for a while. Finally, he replied with, "What a loaded question," and said he'd never thought about it before. At the broadest level of definition, several people claimed that art was everything and that anything could be art, including nature, so grass and trees and rocks were, to them, all art. 3 artists I spoke to outside the portrait gallery claimed that even the shoes they were wearing could be considered to be art, although the Crocs shoes that a passerby was wearing definitely weren't art. However, some people appeared confused about the difference between an inanimate object that exhibited aesthetic qualities and an object that had been specifically created by someone with the intention of being an artistic piece. On the matter of beauty, everybody agreed that an object did not, of course, have to be beautiful to be art, and that you could like an object that wasn't necessarily beautiful. When I asked about graffiti, most people weren't so clear, but the general opinion was that graffiti was art if there had been an attempt at artistic expression, but simple signature tags were not art. When I asked about AI-generated images, most people said no, they weren't. Whatever AI produced, it wasn't art. In terms of the difference between craft and art, one person offered the clever perspective that craft becomes art when the normal pattern for whatever is being created is abandoned and it becomes an individual piece of work. At the end of 2 days, I was much clearer in my own mind, although my opinion as to what art is results in a narrower definition than that of many of the people I spoke with. So here is my definition. Art is a creation of the human mind and hand with the intention of producing a unique object in order to elicit an emotion in the artists themselves and in other people. Anything created by a machine is not art, including AI-generated images. Art can be created in any visual medium. It has levels of formality and soft borders with other forms of visual representation. And finally, to me, art is an entirely visual practice, and therefore music is not art and stage performances are not art. When I finally put chalk to concrete, I loved it. I used only the jumbo sticks, and I'm saving the set of 64 pieces of coloured chalk for, well, not quite a rainy day, but a day when I feel like improving my chalk art skills. This was a relatively cheap exercise in terms of dollars spent. The Kadink tub of jumbo chalk sticks was $2.86 and the Kadink box of 64 different coloured sticks was $9.98, making a total of $12.84. In the next episode, I take on my second challenge in this series, swimming in the very murky Lake Burley Griffin from near the Australian Museum over to Springbank Island and back again. For more information about living your own unlived life, if you go to my website, you can download a copy of my free book, Living Your Unlived Life, Finding Contentment by Honouring Your Dreams. And if it's your thing, you could like this video and subscribe to my channel.